coming up.
What efforts have you made in the last week to ensure that there's more surveillance beyond the ports of entry themselves? Really, for the Americans, they're not seeing anything coming before January 20th to this point, and I find that concerning given we're staring down the barrel of a 25% tariff.
Why did it take being called by the President-elect of the United States and threatening to take you out to the woodshed to get you to finally start talk about doing something about border control?
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
I'd like to welcome the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions and Intergovernmental Affairs, the Honourable Dominic LeBlanc. Now I open the floor up to questions. Ms. Dancho for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. There are 48 days until President Trump is inaugurated on January 20th. So in the next 6 weeks, how many more additional RCMP officers will be redeployed to the border to patrol between ports of entry by January 20th, sir?
Ms. Dancho, thank you for the question. The government has been working with the RCMP and CBSA in particular on how we can increase both the redeployment of officers and acquire new technology and equipment. We will have announcements to make in the coming weeks, recognizing that January 20th is obviously an important moment. I've seen the Commissioner's comments publicly, and he's talked to me about the ongoing redeployment the RCMP and CBSA make dependent on threat assessment, but that I can assure you that work is ongoing, and the details will be some of it's operational police planning. I would leave to the Commissioner,
Minister.
But happy to talk publicly about it.
May I just ask again, but the numbers? How many additional? What is the redeployment numbers for the border? Because you've made it quite clear, sir, that between ports of entry is RCMP jurisdiction. How many will be redeployed? But
again, Ms. Dancho, a very good question. We haven't made, as a government, I think, those final decisions. We're working based on the advice from the CBSA and the RCMP, of course. And I look to the Commissioner or the President if they're in a position to say precisely how many officers at what particular sector or what border crossing. Some of this might, in fact, be operational information.
Actually, we just spoke about it. It doesn't seem that there's been any conversations thus far about redeploying specific resources to the border between ports of entry right now, only if there's perhaps a surge from the United States into Canada. But of course, we know the Americans have an issue with what's coming from Canada into the United States. So thus far, there is no number available or really a plan from what we understand to redeploy RCMP resources. There's also not a plan to increase border agents either. So is there a number in your mind of what the plan is to increase border agents' boots on the ground by the 20th? What is the number that you're looking to increase it?
Again, I've said publicly, and we reassured our American friends at the dinner Friday evening in Palm Beach, that we will be increasing those numbers. I have received some advice from the Border Services Agency and the RCMP. I'm working with the Minister of Finance, and will be happy to announce the details in as much as is possible when they're finalized.
Thank you, Minister. But again, you've been talking about a plan, but there doesn't seem to be any concrete meetings that are happening to increase or to redeploy right now between the borders. I think that is an area of concern because you've said yourself you're not interested in expanding. It's not a priority to expand the CBSA mandate. And I'm sure you saw the communications from the union president there that it's so frustrating as a border agent to see these individuals crossing and that's not in their jurisdiction. So will you be expanding the CBSA mandate to beyond the port, to in between the port of entry, given these dynamics?
So again, Ms. Dancho, you've asked two questions. The first one is there haven't been any meetings to discuss redeployment. I had an opportunity yesterday with the President of CBSA and the Commissioner of the RCMP and our Deputy Minister to discuss potential options in this regard. So those meetings have been ongoing as recently as this time yesterday. Don't want to correct you. You said I have said that we're not interested in expanding the CBSA mandate. I'm not sure that's entirely accurate. What I have said is we're interested in taking immediate steps that will reassure Canadians and the Americans that the border remains secure and the integrity of the border is protected. But we're always interested. We've taken notes of the union president's comments. The Commissioner and I have talked about this issue in the past. We haven't made any decisions in that regard, but are open to considering that as well.
Thank you. But what is the immediate step on the redeployment numbers? You can't tell me the numbers of how many you're going to redeploy. The Commissioner also is not aware of any plan in that regard, and the CBSA president also has not heard any asks from you to increase the boots on the ground. So it doesn't seem that there is immediate action forthcoming on this. And again, it's, 48 days away, and we're facing down the barrel of a 25% tariff and economic recession, and there isn't a concrete plan here that I'm hearing from you about actual boots on the ground to address the concerns of the Americans. Again, so there's no number right now for the redeployment between ports of entry, whether from RCMP or from the CBSA.
So again, Ms. Dancho, I wouldn't imagine you'd want to put words in the mouth of the commissioner or the president of CBSA. I had asked them probably a month and a half or 2 months ago, and a number of times since, obviously, the election of President Trump. As you noted, the initial concern was about a potential south to north flow of people arriving at the border. That was the conversation that captivated Canadians a few weeks ago. You've seen, in light of the president's comments a week ago, that's changed as well, issues around fentanyl. I have received advice from the commissioner of the RCMP and the president of CBSA in terms of additional resources, including human resources, including personnel that we could recruit, hire, and redeploy, as well as equipment. And as I said, I'm working with the Minister of Finance, and we'll be happy to tell Canadians about this important work when it's finalized.
It is a concern we've heard about for 20 days now from the border czar, for President Trump, that this is going to be a problem. But there's no commitment that you're making today or in the past week, and certainly since your trip to Mar-a-Lago, to have additional resources.
I've just made that commitment.
How many, though? How many
again, I told you, we're repeating ourselves. It's a circular argument. I've said that when we have finalized, there will be additional resources, human and equipment. We've said that consistently.
By January 20th?
And we will be making announcements in terms of procurement and personnel before that date. We are finalizing that as a government now, based on the advice that we received, the good advice from the RCMP and from the Border Services Agency. I understand it's exciting, and Canadians want to understand this. So the good news is it's coming.
Thank you, Ms. Dancho.
Thank you.
Your time is up.
The commissioner in our previous panel mentioned surge capacity and that there isn't the intelligence yet to suggest that that surge is needed. However, in the event that that changes, that they are ready. So that's part of addressing this. But number two, we also have border security measures that we want to work with the Americans on, in particular when it comes to guns entering the border. And when it's dealing with President-elect Trump's concerns around securing borders, that it is the southern border, that there were over 2.1 million entries there. What are we doing not only to secure our borders on both sides, but to also speak to the fact that we can increase resources, but the fact is that we have consistently been in making these sorts of investments because we've always been committed to ensuring that our partnership with the U.S. is important, and that goes both ways in terms of imports of things like illegal drugs and guns.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Ms. O'Connell, thank you for the question. I share your view that the security, the continued security and integrity of the border is something that has, I think, occupied our government over the last 10 years. You noted, for example, investments that have been made consistently over a number of years. For example, 10 years ago, the budget for CSIS was $550 million. With these estimates, it'll be over $764 million. The Border Services Agency budget was $2 billion in 2014. It will now be $2.8 billion. The RCMP budget was over $2.8 billion in 2014, and with these estimates, it'll be over $5.7 billion. So we have continued to make investments, but we recognize, as we've said publicly, that there's always more work that we can do. I have become a very, very considerable fan of the excellent work that all of the agencies represented at the table do to protect Canadians and keep them safe. I've seen firsthand the RCMP and CBSA in terms of border security. I've seen briefings from our friends at CSIS that allow the RCMP and CBSA to be prepared, as you noted, for intelligence-driven information that allows them to make operational decisions in their judgment. And finally, Ms. O'Connell, I think your question was a good one. This was the conversation at Mar-a-Lago on Friday evening. It is a shared concern. We told President Trump and his future cabinet secretaries that the fight against fentanyl was one that Canada absolutely understood because we have the same objective as they do, to dismantle the criminal gangs, the Mexican cartels, to stop the arrival of precursor chemicals, largely but not exclusively from China. That's work that's done every day by the men and women represented at this table with me and the people that work for them. It's very important work that we should be proud of, because a great deal of it is done with American partners. And I think the conversation with the Americans on Friday evening was revealing, in the sense we all took stock of integrated border enforcement teams, for example, that operate, and the commissioner will correct me if I have the geography wrong. The province of Quebec has an integrated border enforcement team. Partners from the Sûreté de Québec, for example, participate in this work. This model repeats itself in other parts of the country. The CBSA is a partner. So this is an ongoing and active effort that so many people lean in on, but recognizing, as Ms. Dancho said, the threat of potentially devastating tariff applications to Canadians and the Canadian economy means that we need to show Canadians, and by consequence our American friends, that this work is ongoing, and we're prepared to step up in a visible way as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, the priority, it seems, in addressing the 25% tariff threat from President-elect Trump is addressing what's happening in between the ports of entry right now. You're nodding, so I would agree? You nodded when I said that. No,
of course that's a priority, but it's also a priority at the ports of entry. I see these as equal priorities. We take the operational advice of the RCMP and CSIS in terms of where the particular threat is.
Thank you. It is a priority, though, between the ports of entry, and we're not getting clear commitments from you for the redeployment of RCMP resources or increased boots on the ground. In fact, to Ms. Michaud, when she said that we don't have enough CBSA agents, you said that you didn't agree with her in that regard. So is your opinion that we do, in fact, have enough CBSA agents? So from that, I can defer that there won't be an increase in CBSA agent boots on the ground. And certainly, as you know, our leader, Pierre Poilievre, is committed to working with provincial law enforcement as well to redeputize some of those individuals to secure the in between the ports of entry at the border, and to expand the CBSA mandate to work between the ports as well. So again, we are committed to increasing those boots on the ground, but I'm not hearing that commitment from you, in particular in your response to Ms. Michaud. So there is no commitment to increase boots on the ground at this time. It's certainly not before January 20th. From what you've said.
Yeah, again, just because you repeat it 4 or 5 times, Ms. Dancho, doesn't make it true. I also said to Madame Michaud that we were absolutely committed to increasing the personnel of the CBSA and the RCMP. We have made considerable steps in that regard to reverse the cuts that your previous Conservative government had made, but we also recognize we can do more, and we'll do more as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Minister. I'm glad that you brought the cuts up, because I was reviewing all the annual reports back to the Martin years, if you'd believe it. And it would seem that just based on the annual report data itself, that in fact during the Harper years of 10 years, there was an increase of 1,700 positions at the CBSA during his 10-year mandate, and $500 million of an increase in investments to the CBSA at that point. And in fact, based on the annual report data, in the last year, we ensured that there were 336 additional frontline workers. We were looking at that same time, as you know, to balance the books. Harper eliminated the deficit at that time, and we had a 26% decrease in violent crime, contrasting that with your government's record, Minister, of course, a 50% increase in violent crime and the largest debt accumulation in history. Actually, all governments combined before you don't match the debt that your government has accrued. So it is interesting. And in fact, in the first 2 years of the mandate of your government at CBSA, you cut 237 frontline border boots on the ground positions and another 450 in 2020 to 2021. And in fact, you reduced in 2017 the jobs at CBSA back to 2008 levels. So it is interesting that given the balancing of the budget, reducing of crime under Harper government, we're seeing just quite the opposite from yours. And I'll certainly defend the Harper record 7 days a week in that regard. And I do appreciate that you feel confident that you're bringing forward a plan. We haven't heard any commitment on the numbers. And of course, you weren't invited to Mar-a-Lago because you were doing a good job on the border. In fact, quite the opposite, correct? So we are having serious issues at the border, and we're not getting a sense from you that you're ensuring redeployment of RCMP immediately to secure the border, or that you're increasing agents on the ground at CBSA or working with CBSA to expand their mandate. So again, not clear what your plan is. You've talked about technology, fair enough, we agree in that regard, but you've provided no concrete commitments. And so really for the Americans, they're not seeing anything coming before January 20th to this point. And I find that concerning given we're staring down the barrel of a 25% tariff economic recession by January 20th. So again, I may be obsessed with talking about numbers and boots on the ground, but you have made no commitment on that. And that is the issue that the Americans are threatening us with. So I'll just ask you again, boots on the ground, increase from RCMP to CBSA in between ports of entry, yes or no?
Dancho, what is equally unclear is the infomercial you just did for social media. You talked about Mr. Harper eliminating his own deficit, having inherited a massive surplus from Ralph Goodale. You talked about increasing the CBSA numbers of staff. That's a good thing. The CBSA was born in 2003 after 9/11, so it's not surprising if Mr. Harper became Prime Minister in 2006 and 7 and 8. The CBSA was ramping up the good work that they're doing, so we certainly are glad that Mr. Harper in those early years did that. It's too bad at the end of his government he decided to cut it. And again, Ms. Dancho, you keep repeating that. I hope you get a good clip, but I have said publicly, I said it at Mar-a-Lago, the Prime Minister repeated it, that of course we will be increasing the boots on the ground, to use your phrase, of the CBSA and the RCMP. And I want to be careful. You said that the RCMP have not redeployed resources or have not assigned new people. I have a lot of confidence in the decision that the Commissioner of the RCMP or the President of the CBSA will make on reassigning the appropriate police or law enforcement presence based on the threat that exists. And I've been assured by the Commissioner and the President that they absolutely are operationally ready to meet a potential threat. But the good news is we're going to work with them to ensure they have even more human resources. So there's the specific answer to your question. The answer was yes. We are going to increase the human resources, but we're also going to use technologies which can be very effective as well.
Thank you very much. And just in my accumulating seconds, I have full
Thank you, Ms.
confidence.
Sancho.
I have 15 seconds
No, we're
left.
actually
Yes,
over
I
by
do,
45
based on
seconds.
point of order. When the mic went live, I have 15 seconds remaining, so if you'll just allow me, then the
We're
minister
over.
can finish.
We're over by a minute.
It's 6 minutes. Oh, 5
It's
minutes.
5
You're
minutes.
right. My apologies. Thank you to the Commissioner and to the President. I do have full faith in you. It's your leadership, Minister, that I'm concerned about. Thank you.
I keep hearing things from my Conservative colleagues, and I would say just because President-elect Trump says something doesn't necessarily make it true, and that's why, in my opinion, your trip down there to make sure that the incoming administration knows the facts about the border is really important. We've had conversations about the border my whole time as an MP. And, you know, I am personally really proud of the investments that we've made. You know, all I heard when we first came into office was about the cuts that were made under DRAP, the Debt Reduction Action Plan, across the board in government, but particularly in public safety, where you would think that the previous government would have made it a priority, because they talk about public safety all the time, Minister. We haven't talked about auto theft. And that's a place where actually the previous Harper government removed the scanner that was in Brampton to scan the containers that were at the intermodal terminal there. Our government convened a national summit on auto theft, and at the time, Peel Police Chief Nish actually said to me, I said, what can we be doing? And he said exactly this. So you know, I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about the investments that we've made in auto theft and the progress that we're making on a really complicated issue.
Thank you for that question, and I totally share your concern and the concerns of colleagues that have talked to me about this, about the rising levels of auto theft over the last number of months, over the last couple of years. You're right that we had convened a summit in Ottawa with law enforcement leaders from across the country and provincial and territorial ministers of public safety. Very happy that our colleagues from the larger provinces, Quebec and Ontario, for example, where your province of Ontario and our colleagues in Quebec, where this is an issue, participated. As I said in my opening remarks, the CBSA has done with partner police organizations based on the intelligence that they receive. Obviously, a lot of good work. 2,000 stolen vehicles already retrieved this year. The national trends may show a decrease, we hope, up to 17% in the first 6 months of 2024. Nationally, in Quebec, for example, there's been a 36% decline in stolen vehicles, but a decline from a high level is better than a continued increase, but it's certainly not where we want to get to. So recognizing that our work is not done in that regard, Ms. Damoff, we've made changes to the criminal code to provide additional tools for law enforcement and prosecutors to address auto theft. We've enhanced intelligence sharing and information sharing between municipal, provincial, and federal law enforcement agencies. The Commissioner has spoken to me and was recently at an Interpol meeting in Europe about the very good work the RCMP has done in terms of sharing information with Interpol and the number of foreign police checks at Interpol. He could, I'm sure, provide details for you in that regard. Scanning technologies. I've had an opportunity myself at an intermodal rail yard with some colleagues from Brampton to see a backscatter scanner, I think is the, you don't laugh, Commissioner, that's I think what it's called. It's called a it's actually an RCMP scanner but no, the RCMP lent it to CBSA. There was an RCMP officer running the computer in it. But this scanner can drive beside containers, steel containers in an intermodal yard, and look at 2 containers high. And if it's marked tomato paste, but you see hubcaps and wheels like truck and car wheels, it doesn't look like tomato paste, on the screen in the backscatter scanner. So there's a whole bunch of interesting technologies that will help intercept the stolen vehicles before they get to the Port of Montreal. Much more efficient, much less expensive, and much more reassuring for the person to get their vehicle back than finding it buried 9 containers deep in a port, one of the busiest ports in the country. The president of CBSA has some information on precise technologies that I'm sure will interest all of you.
No, it was just to say we're testing those technologies at the rail yards and also looking what we can do with intelligence.
Minute is very short. Thank you for being here today. Minister, after 9 years, we've heard a lot in this committee lately about crime and chaos being up across Canada. We know there's issues going on. I'm hearing it from Canadians. We've heard about some horrific issues in this committee. Part of that is because of our lax enforcement and border controls. Why did it take being called by the President-elect of the United States and threatening to take you out to the woodshed to get you to finally start talk about doing something about border control?
Mr. Chair, it won't surprise you that I don't agree entirely with the premise of our colleague's question. I thought I talked about the support that our government has given to the RCMP and the CBSA and the border enforcement, a lot of it in partnership with American colleagues, but it takes nothing away from, I think, the obligation at all times for the government to consider what additional measures we can take to support this work that's done. Some cases it's human resources, some cases it's technology, but I think we also have to be honest. When the incoming president of the United States threatens to put a 25% tariff on goods exported to the United States, we saw a 10% tariff some years ago on a sector of the Canadian economy, steel and aluminum, and the pain point that was. So this is a different order of magnitude. So a responsible government would, I hope, take every opportunity to show, as you noted in the question, the incoming administration, how seriously we take this issue and how we're prepared to step up in partnership with them. And 4 days after the President-elect's comments, the fact that we had dinner with him at his residence in Florida on a Friday of a holiday weekend,
Sheriff,
U.S. Thanksgiving weekend, we took as a positive sign.
Getting a lot longer than I had the question.
No, sorry, Mr. Shipley, there was only a minute left.